You ever see something in the news and wonder if there's a bigger pattern at play? Well, what if I told you some people believe that a dream from thousands of years ago actually laid out a blueprint for the rise and fall of world powers, right up to our time? It's a wild idea for sure, and today we're going to unpack one of the most famous prophecies of all time to see what it's all about. So that's the big question we're tackling today. Could a dream that absolutely terrified an ancient king hold the key to understanding the future of global politics? It sounds like something out of a movie, I know, but let's dive into the source material and see where this interpretation takes us. All right, so let's set the scene. We're in ancient Babylon. The guy in charge is the legendary King Nebuchadnezzar. And one night, he has this dream that shakes him to his core. It's so unsettling that he calls in all his wise men and gives them an impossible task. Don't just tell me what the dream means. Tell me what I dreamed in the first place. Of course, they can't, but one man, a Hebrew prophet named Daniel, steps up and says he can. And what a crazy dream it was! Daniel reveals the king saw this huge, magnificent statue. But here's the thing, it was made of different materials and they get less valuable as you go down. It starts with a head of pure gold, then a chest and arms of silver, a torso of bronze, and then these powerful legs of solid iron. But the foundation, that's its fatal flaw. The feet are this weird, brittle mixture of iron and clay. And then bam, the dream ends with this massive stone, seemingly appearing out of nowhere, smashing the feet and bringing the whole thing crashing down into dust. So, what on earth does that mean? Well, Daniel explains that this isn't just some random, bizarre vision. Each of those metals represents a major world empire, one following the other, dominating the world stage. It's a prophetic timeline. Daniel starts by looking right at the most powerful man in the world and says, "You, O king, you are that head of gold." So, kingdom number one is Babylon. Simple enough. After that, he says will come an inferior kingdom of silver, which history tells us was the Medo-Persian Empire. Next up, a kingdom of bronze that would rule over the whole earth. That's a perfect description of Alexander the Great's Greek Empire. And finally, a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, with the power to smash and crush everything before it. And that, of course, is the Roman Empire. Okay, so the first four parts seem pretty straightforward, right? A historical lineup of ancient superpowers. But the real puzzle, the thing that makes this prophecy so debated, is the statue's weak point. What in the world is going on with those fragile feet? What does that strange mix of iron and clay really represent? This brings us to the most fascinating and, frankly, the most controversial part of the whole vision: those feet of iron and clay. This is where the source material we're digging into today offers a very specific and pretty unique interpretation. Now, the prophecy itself gives us a huge clue. It says this final version of the kingdom will be divided. It'll have the strength of iron, yeah, but also the weakness, the brittleness of clay. And here's the key line: they will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. You can try, but they just don't bond. This points to a fundamental instability, a built-in weakness right at its foundation. So if iron is Rome, what's the clay? Well, according to the interpretation we're exploring, you find the answer by looking at how the word clay is used as a symbol everywhere else in the Old Testament. And the argument is that it consistently points to one thing, and one thing only: the people of Israel, being shaped by God, who is called the potter. The source we're looking at really hinges on verses like this one from the prophet Jeremiah. God literally says, "Like the clay in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel." For this interpretation, this is the smoking gun. This is the decoder ring. If the iron is the Roman Empire and the clay is the house of Israel, then the prophecy must be talking about an unstable mix of those two groups. And if that's true, it completely reframes the final phase of the Roman Empire. It wasn't just Rome anymore. According to this view, it was a messy, dysfunctional, and totally unstable marriage between Roman imperial power and the Jewish authorities of the day. So let's just break that down. The source argues that those iron and clay feet symbolize a very real historical situation. The iron is the brute force of Rome. The clay represents the part of the Jewish leadership. We're talking about rulers like the Herodians and the high priests, the Sadducees, who decided to collaborate with Rome to keep their power and position. And you have to understand, Judea at this time was completely torn apart by this question. You had one camp, the pro-Rome collaborators, who were literally trying to mix their clay with the iron of Rome. But then you had this whole other camp, the anti-Rome resistance fighters like the Zealots, who wanted nothing more than violent rebellion.
You can't get more divided than that. It's the perfect picture of a kingdom that will not remain united.
And the consequences of this toxic mixture, according to this view, were just devastating. This leadership, by siding with Rome, created this oppressive system. And who did they turn on? Their own people. They ended up persecuting the most faithful Jews, including John the Baptist, Jesus himself, and the first Christians. It was this internal rot, this complete failure of the iron and clay to hold together, that made the whole thing so fragile and ultimately led to its catastrophic collapse.
But remember, the dream doesn't end with crumbling feet. The final act is that stone, the one cut without hands. This is the real climax of the story. It represents a totally new kind of kingdom that shows up and just obliterates the entire history of human empires.
So, what is this stone? Well, in this framework, the stone is the kingdom of God. The fact that it's not by human hands is crucial. It means its origin is divine, not man-made, and it's identified directly with Christ, who the New Testament calls the cornerstone that the builders, the religious authorities of the day, rejected. Now here's where it gets really layered. The source we're examining proposes a two-stage fulfillment. The first strike, it argues, already happened. When Christ came the first time, his life and teachings spiritually shattered the authority of that corrupt Roman Jewish system. But the final strike is still in the future. That will be a physical destruction of all earthly kingdoms when Christ returns. And after that, the prophecy says the stone grows into a massive mountain that fills the whole earth, which symbolizes God's everlasting kingdom, finally established for good. And this is where the source brings it all right into the 21st century. It takes this ancient prophetic model and extends it to our world today. It actually draws a parallel, suggesting that the modern strategic alliance between the United States, as a kind of modern iron superpower, and the state of Israel is a contemporary echo of that same unstable iron-clay dynamic. In this view, this is the final form of that divided kingdom, just before the stone's final prophesied strike. So, that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. Is this ancient dream a literal step-by-step blueprint for world history, mapping out empires from Babylon all the way to a modern US-Israel alliance? Or is it maybe a timeless symbolic warning about what happens when divine faith gets mixed up with earthly political power, a mixture that is always ultimately unstable and doomed to fail? Definitely something to chew on.